That's not the way it's supposed to go. Hi, welcome back to Now TV Canada. I don't know if I should do that stuff or not. Yeah, it sucks when you can't do live videos with the sound anymore in the background unless you own the rights to it. Kind of ruins the whole thing with what was fun about YouTube when we all started with it. So I am your host, Jen, from I Am Just Jen YouTube channel, as you all know. And the topic today, the subject is not about Tom Welling, but he's still always in the back of my head. Anyway, this is about January 22nd. Oops. Where did it go? January 22nd, 2008. This has to do with Heath Ledger, the actor. And I say this because that's the date he passed away, 28, because of the connecting birthday of Jessie Rose Lee, just a few days later, January 26th. And my birthday, of course, being the top that I am, being the oldest, being the number one, January 18th. Capricorn, horns, the top of the mountain. So in 2008, I was living a pretty weary life back and forth between active using, not using, working and not working. Because when I worked, I did my job and I didn't mess with nothing. And when I wasn't working, I'd go have a bit of fun stuff. Anyways, I was in Winnipeg at this point. There was a casting call that was made for people at the convention center. And a little birdie told me that it had something to do with some movie that might have been related to Heath and or Brad and Angie kind of thing. And since I worked in security, I thought, okay, I'm not working with that guy right now anywhere. So let's do the casting call. And it called for horses, things around horses and stuff. Now, later on, I thought maybe it had something to do with Brokeback Mountain or something, right? I, to this day, don't know for sure. But I got a phone call after the casting call from Impact Security, where I was employed, wherever he had offices. And at this time, he had an office in Winnipeg and an office in Alberta. So he says, hey, I've got this contract, secret hush-hush thing, movie stars coming to this private, cabin ranch property. How would you like to leave Winnipeg and come to Alberta and work there? And the pay's pretty good because they're paying him pretty good. And for 2008, $18 an hour was pretty good for sitting in your car for 12 hours. So I said yes, and I went there to Alberta, and he put me in his son's room, whom he never got to see, put me up in his house. Pretty offensive guy, sexist, male chauvinist, all that atypical stuff. And he has a Hummer in his garage because it makes up for the small size of his stature in every other way. But he was pretty demeaning in how he treated me as a woman in her 30s who had already been divorced and mother of one kid. Anyways, who's lived a much more experienced life than he'll ever know, shrouded by house protecting him, mortgage and overflow of funds, never having to worry about paying his bills kind of life. It was very annoying. However, you want the money, you want to work. So I have to sign this secret contract. All of us that did this had to sign the secret contract at the time to go and do this work to protect Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. And at the time, there were just two kids involved. I don't think that they were any of the naturals. I think it was just two adopted kids at that point, if I remember correctly. I don't have to swear by secrecy anymore. I don't have to worry about it. But at this time, Heath Ledger was still alive. Alive, oh, as the Irish CD that he used to love listening to, having to do with the background in his family lineage. A CD I love listening to. Alive, oh, he was. Previous to that event, where I went to Alberta because I had been told by a little birdie again that Heath was going to meet up with Brad Pitt, being like best friends, besties, at this location. And I'm like, yeah, sure, great, love to go and meet Heath because I was a writer. I write romantic stuff, poetry, plays, write songs. He plays guitar. My head is thinking, maybe we can make a video, write song together, sing, whatever. Help me get a break and help him have something new to do. See that there's options of friends with European, lineage. Anyway, um, I don't know exactly what happened. I know that Heath was making 4 movies at once, and he was having trouble sleeping because one of those movies obviously was what he won his Oscar for, The Joker, and it's just too much on somebody. And he was hanging out with the Full House girl, and she pled the fifth, wouldn't tell anybody where she got medications that he took that he mixed with. Now, if he had hired me doing my security work because of my lived experience, age, and experience with medications and first aid, whatever, he would still be alive because I would have said, no, don't touch that. Don't take that. You don't know where it's from, who you got it from. You don't know what's in it, blah. Here, take this instead, because I would know that that would be the safer alternative, or go to a doctor and literally get something from a doctor that's just for you in your name. So I was there, and it's wintertime, like coldest part of winter. I guess like it must have been December, November, December, nearing this time because he was still alive. And my car stopped working. The heat stopped working. I had no heat in my car. And I have a thing about fiberglass. I don't like new fiberglass cars. It's all junk. It costs $5 to build these cars in factories. There's very few people making these cars. I like old-fashioned metal cars, that suck in the cold and burn you from the heat between winter and summer. Like you have to put a glove on or make sure your window has its own pair of reflecting glasses so you can actually get in your car in the summertime, and even protected in the wintertime when we have clear skies. So I like to get out of the car and have circulation in my body. I like to have oxygen and blood flow going. I like to be awake and be alert. I'm not one of those people where you have that reputation of a sleep on the job kind of guard. I wasn't that kind of person. I don't do that. And also, it's important to walk the grounds to make sure there's no paparazzi, no people with night vision cameras, or binoculars of any kind trying to get any scoop on Brad and Angie on a huge property like that from anywhere around the fence line, or on the other side of the ravine in the bushes. So I just liked to do my job properly. Other people were just sitting around chit-chatting near the gate or in their cars, staying put static, and that's not really the job. And in their phones, talking to each other, listening to music, whatever. I'm just not there. um, because I had no heat in my car, I also had a problem with body temperature and safety issues, right? I also have degenerative disc disorder in my in my spine, so I have issues with a bulging disc and deteriorating discs, and there's compression up against one of my nerves, where multiple discs are rubbing close to that same area in that nerve, and it's just short of compressing it. So if your spinal cord becomes fully compressed, if there's no way for blood flow or oxygen to get through, this leads to killing your nerves off, right? This leads to paralysis because your nerves die. And so I know I have to be mobile, physically move around. I couldn't do long haul truck driving for decades because I have to stop and get out of the car. Same thing when I'm driving anything for myself or pleasure. It takes me longer than most people because I have to get up and move around. I can't sit for too long, any more than I can stand for 12 or 16 hours like I used to do when I was younger doing flagging work. Now I'm good for about 9, 10 hours, and basically a person shouldn't be standing more than that anyway. I mean, on a bad day, if there's a no show for switching shifts, I can manage my 12s. But at this point, that version of my depth of diagnosis hadn't been made clear because I hadn't had an MRI still. But for the sake of having no heat in my car and wanting to stay awake and not fall asleep and die in the frozen conditions of Alberta winters, I decided I'm going to walk the property line and do a two-in-one thing, something good for me and something good for them. And I walked down to the front part of this big, beautiful log cabin or whatever retreat that they were at. And there was this nice little cubby area towards the front door, which is right in front of the beautiful ravine, where at that point in the holiday season, whatever, that water was flowing constantly. So it wasn't frozen over like an ice rink. And so there was a bench that's right in front of that ravine and that little bushy wilderness area next to their door. And on the other side would have been like whatever SUV truck kind of thing that they were driving that had their 4x4 toys in the back, whatever, their motorcycles and stuff, the Goldwyn. They had some pretty nifty rides. Then I remember being at the gate when they're going out for rides with the motorcycles together and stuff for the things they did have in common as friends, whatever. Um, so I decided this was a good spot to block myself from the colder weather and the winds at this point and just relax and enjoy myself because I had walked the grounds. Everything was good, things were safe, and sit down and close my eyes and just relax and breathe, meditate, and listen to the sound of the ravine of nature, the rawness of wilderness in the winter time near Christmas. New Year's. It's blissful. And being a poet, being a writer, I do this, take in everything so that I can create, write, be inspired later. And it also helps to re energize you. And somewhere in all of this, there was an accusation that went flying from the view of the cameras that I was sleeping on the job and that I was sitting there at the bench and not in my car, sitting still for 12 hours in the dead of winter. Um, but I wasn't, and I should have been um, commended for being the only one on staff with the initiative to do grounds checks and making sure that everyone was safe. And that in exchange, a few minutes of sitting on the bench and enjoying the ravine and the beautiful nature of the wilderness that surrounds me as a city kid, inner city person who had not been camping. I have not pitched a tent since 1994 when I was 19 years old. At this point, I was in my 30s. I am now 50, and I still have not pitched a tent since 1994. So I have managed to finally get in a canoe and a kayak a few times. But at that point, it was extremely special to me to be able to hear something and see something that had been so long ago for me in my past that somebody should have just been friendly enough to open the door and come out and talk to me, approach me, sit down. You can see I'm super easy to talk to, very friendly. Um, and it was very bad and dishonest. And it's not even legal to not tell Brad Pitt uh, that my problem had been that I had no heat in my car. Now, John from Impact Security, the man who was running the company, didn't tell them that I was having this problem. And I had told John that my car had no heat in it. And I couldn't just pull out a credit card and just pay for the heat to get fixed because I had already just driven from Manitoba to Alberta to do this 6 week short term contract, right? I didn't have that routine stability and income in this industry. For this kind of work, when you want to get well paid, you have to be willing to travel to get to those sites, contracts, and good pay. So there I was going, well, what do I do? And he's like, oh, well, you have to work 2 full weeks of your 12-hour night shifts in that car with no heat. And then I will use my credit card and I will pay to fix your car and take it off your paycheck. And I got released from the job for sitting there on the bench that night when I was out walking around doing my job, checking the grounds. Instead of Brad or Angie coming to find out that I was doing grounds checks while nobody else was caring about whether or not they were safe, which is kind of the point of the job. And that it's common sense that you shouldn't expect people to be static in their cars in the dead of winter for 12 hours. They need to get some circulation, fresh air to stay alert, to stay awake. You're going to have guards that are sleepy or sleeping, not functioning if they're sitting in a car for that many hours, more than if they're walking around and then just taking in crisp, fresh air in the coldest part of the winter after doing grounds checks, right? Because they're in the warmth of a car, which makes you sleepier. So it's just a lot of nonsense, no common sense. I don't know which one of them it was that complained, but based on knowing Brad the way that I do and his being friends with Heath Ledger, I don't think he'd be the one to complain about me sitting on the bench enjoying the ravine, the beautiful nature of the water and the wonderful bushes there, because of how short of a time it was, like less than 5 minutes. I think more or less that it was because I had peeked through the window. I wanted to see how beautiful the inside of that luxurious large building was, cabin. Um, and I had happened to see the counter, the kitchen counter across the room through the window. And all I really saw was just a loaf of bread that was open. There was some slices of bread that were out of the bag, like falling out, and something on the counter. I don't know what it was. Could have been peanut butter. But I thought, anyway, well, somebody likes to eat a lot of sandwiches. And the Bible says man cannot live on bread alone, right? So there's a unhealthy dietary thing going on there, which could explain moodiness and issues with friendship. Now, everyone knows about Brad drinking, and we know about his smoking pot and stuff. It's just the normal part of his background history and his life and who he was when he was young. But you have to add on to what happened at that time and what was going on between him and Angie, and him not knowing what it was that got under his skin, what was bugging him about that experience. And then the death of Heath Ledger, and my life having a direct effect on the fact that Heath then went on to die because I didn't get to stay there, finish the 6-week contract, get to talk to Brad, have Brad get to know me better, and get to the point where Brad's so mad about the car having no heat that he puts me in his truck. And then I get to sit behind the wheel of the truck because I've had a trucker's license, which means you can drive all kinds of sizes of vehicles, including flatbeds. So you're very useful and productive, even more so than Angie faking it as an actress. I don't know if she could fake driving things as big as I have. But point is, he would have got to know me better and realized that I had some vital value, purpose, and he wouldn't have been so quick. And the Brad I know and we know is that Brad would have gone to confront John at Impact Security in his office about how much money him and Angie were paying him for good services, for protection, for the amount of guards that were there, and that the man didn't have an ounce of conscience, an ounce of goodness in him to pay to fix my car immediately. One, to not even care about the bill for how much it costs because he has enough money. Two, to pay for it in advance and let me stay and work the whole 6 weeks so that there's enough money for me to still have some money when I leave. Like, I literally left there after the car was fixed. I drove to Vancouver and I ran out of gas in the back lane in the downtown east side. So what do you think's going to happen to my life when I get back to my neighborhood in a car where I can't really drive it anywhere when I get there because I wasn't allowed to finish working, where I would have stayed working and stayed in a better state of mind, better state of condition, and had an actual better life? Well, I don't have to leave it to anyone's imagination what went on to happen to my life, right? Monkey see, monkey do. You fall back into the old routines. Um, Now, when it came to Heath, I ended up leaving Vancouver that year. I'd had enough. Was this 2007? I guess it was, because he passed away in 2008. So all of this would have happened in 2007. So I left Vancouver in 2007 because I'd had enough. I wanted to change. It was time. So when somebody's offering you something and you're like, no, and you mean it, do something, right? So I had money burning in my pocket because I'm like, no. And so I went and got a Greyhound bus. And at this point, I'm no longer driving this car. I won't talk about that. But it got parked in somebody's yard, and there it sits to this day. Um, I caught a Greyhound bus up to where I was born in Prince Rupert. I was up there for like 6 months before I found out that he died, because when you're up north in BC, the world is a different place. Like, that part of Canada was just beginning to get 911 on their phone. Before that, they were calling different number, like 211, 311, whatever, 999, blah. It wasn't 911. And I had spent my whole life being an inner city street kid, hitchhiking around in bigger metropolis areas outside of being born in Prince Rupert. And I was just getting there, and they were just getting 911. And I was like, whoa, backwoods, what a weird place. All these small communities, 50,000 people or less, and you got to drive 2 hours in every direction to get to the next group of people. And Prince Rupert turned out to have like the smallest amount. Where I was born, 12,000 people. So fast forward those 6 months later, after me discovering Highway of Tears and the missing and murdered women and stuff, and trying to hitchhike from Prince Rupert to Terrace to get to one town, scaring the living daylights out of myself because I could end up one of the victims on the list based on my life history of traveling around. I then find out that Heath died, and I lost my mind, because if I had been allowed to be there in Alberta, stayed there, and had become connected with Brad Moore and told my story about how much I loved Heath in his early career movies. A Knight's Tale. Was it 10 Things That was it Hate About You or Love About You? Oh, anyways, the Knight's Tale was essentially it. For me, I went to a matinee in Winnipeg at this Town Cinema 8 place where they have all these extra theater rooms, and for some reason, there was just a good luck day, and I had been the only person that had bought a ticket, and I had the whole theater to myself. How much does it cost to rent a whole theater for a private showing for yourself, for whatever person you're viewing this with? And I can't describe to you how awesome it was to be alone with Heath, with him playing that character in that movie with me on that day in the middle of the afternoon, and I didn't have to pay an extra penny for it. It was beautiful. There are no words for that. And I don't know how his spirit and soul managed to go, okay, you're special and you deserve this, so we're going to do this together. Now, this hurts so much because I had this idea to do A Knight's Tale 2, and honor the character in another way, being the female, pretending to be the guy, not him, but, trying not to be the girl. I'm not sure you can make me look like a guy, but anyway, that was the idea. And then, honor his character legacy in that second movie. Instead, I ended up writing the Supergirl trilogy. Though I wanted to write that second movie when I had found out he had passed away, I ended up starting the Supergirl 2 movie, which I thought was just going to be one movie. When I was growing up, I had promised to myself, after watching Supergirl movie, when they're cracking jokes about Jehovah's Witnesses knocking on doors, I think it was Faye Dunaway's character answering the door and the thing going on, whatever. And I got mad because of this image, this typecasting that people have an impression of about what everybody who's a part of that religion is like. And I was like this little stubborn kid, arms on the hips, going, well, I don't behave like that. We're not all the same. I'm going to grow up and write the second movie to this. And as Jehovah God as my witness, I did do that, to make a point that you can have a successful career in this industry and be an individual and not be assimilated like Seven of Nine in those Star Trek stuff, right? Um, and it just kept coming out of me, just pouring out of me, because I was so upset. I cried, I screamed, like I lost my mind. I went out into the wilderness. I took an apple, and I hung it from a tree, like in the Garden of Eden when Adam and Eve ate from the fruit of the tree of death or life, good and evil. And I was like trying to give back to God this thing that they did wrong, because their sin isn't my sin. And I wanted Heath back, and I wanted the chance to work with him. And I wished Brad knew the truth, and that if it was Angie, that she'd apologize. And I was just convinced that their friendship could have been saved and things would have been better between Brad and Angie if they had known the truth about John not paying to fix the car and firing me for not having heat in my car, for leaving my car and not sitting in it frozen for 2 weeks for 12-hour night shifts, and not saying anything to them, either me or him, and how illegal that is. Um, so the whole thing was just a big, huge mess. And I knew that it was time to make a video here, go out to Brad, because he doesn't have a way of getting contact social media wise. I don't think she does as well. But if any of you are watching this, it's a true story I'm telling you. And that if you can reach Brad Pitt or Angie and let them see this story and know about what John did at Impact Security to help me, get what I deserve, justice for this. I have no question in my heart, mind, or soul, no doubt that the friendship between Brad and Heath was so strong, that Brad would come back to Canada. He'd go find John, and really confront him about it and think about how much money I'd be owed if I had stayed in Alberta and had been working and going up in wages and having stability and finding a better life and being around horses, whatever else could have changed in my life. Or just getting to be friends around Brad, how it could have saved Heath. All these things for both him and Angie going through their heads, and the stress of their relationship falling apart based on the one person who complained about it to John, and how no truth came out of that and no one came to talk to me, who was the most damaged and hurt person out of the whole thing. So I make this video to you, Brad and Angie, and to anybody who can get the video to you, and getting to John at Impact Security in Alberta to try and, uh, you know, make some sort of restorative justice out of this whole situation. And maybe we can work together on something new that also has to do with horses, in honor of him. I do have him in some of my poetry books. I do have a piece I wrote for Matilda, and I do have like this little knight that cost me a pretty penny, because he came from another part of the world, and it was about the same size as his daughter at the time that she died. At the time he died, sorry, that she might still enjoy receiving, because I had dedicated it, put a little metal plate on there, and my mom's got it safely stored at her place. So this is my story to you. I'm going to end it here, 30 minutes. It's a true story. It's wrong to fire somebody for not having heat in their car. And it's worse to not tell the people who complained about the person sitting on the bench, blocking themselves from the cold air and the winter weather, and enjoying the sound of a beautiful ravine that hadn't frozen over into ice, in a very romantic time of the year, in a very romantic location, and just make this assumption the person's asleep, and not come and talk to this person to find out the actual truth that, about what's going on, and then go, and confront the person behind the awkward situation, and then find a way to fix it, so all would have ended well, which would have ended with Heath remaining alive, because Brad would have probably contacted him and told him to come there, after I told Brad that a little birdie told me that because they're best friends that he was going to catch up with them and meet there, And because I said that, it would have been in Brad's head to tell Heath that. And then Heath would say, I'm on my way to meet the poet and the songwriter and stuff. And Brad would be like, I've read some of her work and some of her songs. It's pretty good and whatever. So we three would have been happy. So let's hope that through these videos I make about people and my connecting real stories, working in security and as a professional writer will somehow result in a proper outcome as it should. So this is me signing out from Now TV Canada, aka Superwoman, aka the writer of Supergirl 2, 3, and 4. You've got Mel 2, the Smallville reunion movie, and much, much more. Peace out, everyone. Stay warm, stay safe, stay well, and for crying out loud, be honest. Honesty is always the best policy. Bye for now.